And this is what I played for him.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo until the fourth day of... Before we continue with the conversation between myself and Phil from the Amish Inquisition talking about the history of the Gunpowder plot, I'd just like to play you a small clip from the conversation I had and an even older friend, Ian Smith, who I first met in the mid-1960s, and this is a conversation about Bonfire Night in our home village in the southeast of England back in the 1960s and 70s.
We used to have a small bonfire in our garden. More often than not, we'd go round to my auntie's house, and she lived over Shalford Common. There was a big green outside her house, and they used to start building a bonfire there like 2 months before Bonfire Night.
Right.
And the thing would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. It would just get huge. And there'd be a lot of pallets in there.
Yes,
but then the furniture, trees, everything.
That's right.
And it was a handy way for people to get rid of their rubbish, I think.
You just go round the doors and just ask people for any old wood or, any old rubbish, as you say.
Absolutely massive.
Yeah.
So that was the focal point, really.
Yeah.
Did you go to any? Or did you have one?
Yeah, we had one in the back garden. It's all so long ago, as you know, but it's difficult to remember exactly how many times we did this. But I do have memories of at least one occasion where we were in the back garden. My mum and dad used to invite these friends down from the top of the road. He was a postie like my dad, and they would come down with their kids who were older than us. We would sort of just have this sort of two family sort of bonfire night, and they would be letting fireworks off and everything. And I can remember sort of being kept away from the fire because I must have been like really young. And we had like a quite a big fire, and of course we had the woods behind us. I don't know if you remember my back garden.
Yes,
we had the fields and the river and the woods, so we used to go over there and just grab anything we could.
Perfect.
Perfect. And there was one further up the road where these older lads who probably has got like 10 years on us, and it was absolutely huge, and you could walk into it. They hollowed it out.
Really?
And they had all the chairs and everything in it as well, just stuck in the side and everything. Yeah. And then they had the guys stuck on top. Yeah, that was huge, absolutely huge. And then there was the village one at, I believe there was one by the old nursery, opposite the dairy, sort of down by the rail.
That one I remember, I remember that just being enormous. There's a lot of people being there as well.
Right.
Did you ever used to make a guy?
We had a wooden truck that we used to collect wood in, like pram wheels on the side of it and the big handles. And it was like a box truck. And we used to push that around with the guy in it, doing the old penny for the guy. And we'd go around Shell Village, around the shops, and just accosting random strangers, trying to get money out of them.
Yeah, I don't recall ever making much money at that.
No. Yeah, the idea was to raise money for the fireworks, wasn't it, really?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
But I remember having the odd little box of fireworks with my mum and dad. And myself, we had to keep well out of the way. There was always a bit of a game with the fireworks, whether they were going to light and go off or not.
Yeah, that's right. And then sometimes you'd go back to it, or you shouldn't do, but sometimes you'd go back to it to check it, and then you get one in the face. These things happen, didn't they?
Yeah. I remember the local newspaper the following day or the following week.
Horror stories. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Before anything happened. But I do remember that it did start getting much more organised. I remember having to do quite a long walk. Do you remember East Shalford Lane?
Oh, yeah.
Farm around there, and that was one of the first sort of things. You had to traipse across the field. It was in some farmer's field, but it was more organised. I do remember that the fireworks were not too impressive. There was always a Catherineville that would generally tend to escape. And I remember
that's right, yeah.
I think one time it set fire to my dad's sheds.
Yeah. We had an elderly couple next door to us, lovely people. She didn't like fireworks at all. She just didn't like all the banging and flashing and so on. Right. My dad was a little bit mischievous, to put it mildly. he got one of those, I always call them jumping jack flashes, but they weren't, were they? They would jump in something else. And we had a passageway between our house and theirs, concrete pathway with brick wall up either side, very narrow, with asbestos boards above our head, sort of like 8 foot. My dad put one of these jumping things in the passageway just to get a reaction from her next door, and it was just bouncing up and down, hitting the roof and then coming down, hitting the roof and coming down, And I can remember her coming out sort of wondering what was going on,
Do you know, one thing that I was thinking about, it was never a big thing about food.
No, it was just, well, for us, it was like hot dogs, and I don't think think we even called them hot dogs. They were just sausages in a bun with some ketchup.
The odd occasion to be toffee apples. There wasn't so much of a focus on that. It was more about the fires as much as anything. Yeah, it all kind of changed from the little back garden thing.
Yeah, that was fun, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone up. I can remember like looking up and down the road in the back gardens, and like probably every other one had a bonfire, and there were fireworks going off everywhere. Plus the ones from that farm, but we used to see them coming up over the back of the woods.
I remember the day after was always foggy. It was always foggy. There was so much smoke going up into the air. It kind of affected things a bit, so you always get that. And you find all the ends of the fireworks laying around the place.
Yeah, that's right, everywhere, bangers and
bangers,
sparklers, spent sparklers.
That was the one thing when we were really young that we were allowed to wave around, the sparklers.
Oh, definitely. I can sort of remember the smells of the night. That sort of autumnal. What is that Shakespeare thing, like a season of mellifluous? I can never remember that one.
Fruitfulness.
And now back to my conversation with Phil from the Amish Inquisition about the origins of Bonfire Night.
It was a rabbit warren. It wasn't like the Westminster we see today. It was a mesh of tunnels, houses, shops, pubs, and palaces of Westminster as well, all interlinked. And I mean, the first sort of meeting takes place at the Duck and Drake, spring of 1604, and there's only, I think, 5 plotters originally. You've got Robert Catesby, who's the main man, whose father was persecuted. They're all expecting great things from James. We sort of bypass that, but James comes to power, and then there's 2 plots. There's the by plot and the main plot. The main plot was Walter Raleigh was involved in, and these were Catholic plots to get rid of James. And so when that happens, all these recusant laws come back in. These laws about Catholics and priest holes and punishments and fines and all the rest of it. And that's like the final straw for Catesby. It's like with Elizabeth. Sorry, go on.
I'm just saying they've exhausted their patience. Like they can't see anything working in their favour, and they just think we've just got to do something. Yeah. But I was just going to mention Dido himself. He was born a Protestant, and then his father died, and his mother remarried a Catholic, which sort of had converted him. So that was really an accident of fate.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
and he's one of the early plotters. He's recruited in Flanders because after he converts to Catholicism, he sort of stands around. He sort of sticks with it for about 10 years, and then says, "I've had enough of this. I'm joining the Spanish army," and he goes to.
So he's fighting for the Pope in the Low Countries.
Yeah, against the Dutch, and this makes him a perfect guy for the plotters. The other main plotters are well known. The wealthy guys. He's been out of the country for 10 years. He's not a known face. People don't know who he is. Catesby's well known, especially to the authorities. I mean, these are guys who have been paying fines. The fathers have been persecuted. Yeah. You can imagine that Burley, Walsingham, they've all got spies all around. They're monitoring these guys.
Right.
But Guy Fawkes, he's been out of the country for 10 years. He's a good guy. Plus, he's a military man. He knows about gunpowder.
Been using it for years.
Yeah. He'll know about siege warfare. He'll know about logistics, how to move it safely, and all this sort of stuff. He's the perfect guy, and he's the odd man out as well because he's of relatively low birth. Whereas Catesby and Thomas Percy, Thomas Winter, they're all from very wealthy,
upper class people. Yeah,
generally from the Midlands or the North.
Right.
And they've all got land, and they can afford to pay these fines for being recusants. In fact, the recusants, the Catholics who maybe couldn't afford to pay these fines and sort of went along with these laws and went to the church services. The recusants derisively called them church papists. And there's a story, like they would do tricks. They would like play mental games to sort of take them out of the mass, like crossing your fingers while they were saying the mass. And there was even a story of one guy who had cloth in his ears, a Catholic who had cloth in his ears. And it always made me wonder. I used to get cold cloth ears as a kid. Did you used to get cold cloth ears?
Occasionally, yeah.
So, like when you're a kid, if you didn't do if you weren't listening to your mum and dad, they'd say, "Oh, your cloth ears." The plot happens in 1605. James I is king, Francis Bacon and Walter Raleigh and Count Richelieu. He's a young man at this point over in France. He's like in his 20s when this is happening. So it's this period. Right. So anyway, the year before, in the spring, they have this meeting. Catesby, who's fed up, absolutely fed up.
This is Duck and Drake.
This is Duck and Drake. Yeah, it's in. I think it's in the spring of 1604.
Near the palace, wasn't it?
Near off the Strand, apparently.
Oh, right.
Apparently it was off the Strand, but it's one of these things where we don't really know.
So it's long gone.
It's long gone, yeah. And the sort of the main 5 conspirators meet there. You've got Robert Catesby, Jack Wright, Thomas Percy, who's the really well-connected guy, Thomas Winter, and Guy Fawkes. Right. And this is where Robert Catesby said the only way to sort of end this is to blow them all up with powder, and so that's when the sort of plan is first set in motion. Curiously, in like the next room, there's a Catholic service happening. And it's some people believe they took communion while they were there. Now, I'm not sure which priest it was, whether it was Henry Garner or John Gerard or Tessamond. The 3 main priests are involved in this situation. But apparently there was a service going on next door and they took communion. We know what we're going to do. We're going to get this. So they start getting the powder and stuff. Thomas Percy, as you mentioned earlier, he has a house in Westminster that he has the lease on. So that's where they start moving the powder to, Guy Fawkes. Right. And throughout this whole plot, Parliament keeps getting, the state opening of Parliament keeps getting prorogued, which is this horrible constitutional term in the UK. It just means it's getting put off. It's being postponed. Right. And this keeps giving them more time, and it means the plot keeps getting expanded and more people get sucked into it. So, they start moving the powder. Moving the powder turns out to be a bigger job, so they recruit a couple of other guys, Robert Keyes and the servant you mentioned, Tom Bates.
Yes, yeah.
That's where they come in to sort of help Guy Fawkes. And it keeps getting delayed. What does that mean? Well, with more time for plotting. Yeah,
and more time to be found out as well,
Yeah. So. Well, this is where, when it gets prorogued in 1605, all of a sudden they have this summer of 1605 where they're basically waiting. And that's when they go up to the Midlands and start try and rally support. And they come up with this second half of the plot. And basically the second half of the plot is to kidnap James's daughter, Elizabeth, who's about 8 or 9 at this time. We're going to kidnap her. She's been held in Coventry. She's staying in Coventry. She's miles away. And we will put her in as a Catholic queen with a regent, probably the Duke of Northumberland, someone like that, someone in the north. And we'll sort of gather as many people as we can from the north and the Midlands to stage an uprising. And it's audacious, really. This idea of a Midlands uprising. But this is where more people get sucked into the plot. So Jack Wright's brother Kit, he gets brought into the plot. Thomas Winter's brother Robert, he comes into the plot, and John Grant, who I don't think we know much about. And because of this sort of extension in the plot, they're thinking about an uprising and horses and arms, and with the proroguing keeps setting things back. They're running out of money. They're needing more money, and that's when they bring sort of the last 3 guys in: Everard Digby, Ambrose Rookwood, and Tresham, the last guy to come on board.
Francis Tresham,
and this is only like a month. This is like September 1605 when he comes on board, and he's proper reticent. He says he thinks Catesby's mad, and he tries to talk him out of it. He even offers to pay him to go to Europe and just forget about all this. And
and he ended up being killed as one of the conspirators, did he? Or was it in a shootout?
All of these guys, none of these guys survived. They were either killed at Holbeach House or they were found afterwards. The only people who survived were a couple of the priests who knew what was going on. So because this is being expanded in this summer of 1605, more and more people are finding out about it. There's a pilgrimage in Wales, St. Winifred's Well, which happens in August-September of 1605, and one of the conspirators is there, Ambrose, plus Anne Vawkes, who's one of these women who is like a shepherd for the priests. She's part of this network of recusants who harbour priests. And Henry Garnet is there, and he's the superior of the Jesuits in England. Henry Garnet, he's an important guy. And as they're going on this pilgrimage, they sort of stay at friends' houses on the way. I think it's at Ambrose Rookwood's house where they stop. And this Anne Vawkes, she notices the war horses in the stable, and she says something to Henry Garnet, the head of the Jesuits. She says, I'm going to forget the words, but she says something like, "These wild heads have something ominous planned. For God's sake, Henry, talk to Catesby, talk him out of it." So they know something's coming up.
Yeah.
And even Catesby's not immune to this sort of thing. He gives a confession to his personal priest, who is Tessimond. Yeah, he gives a confession to Tessimond about the plot. And it's funny. It's a funny sort of technical thing, because it's classed as a walking confession. It's not in a confessional box. So Tessimond tells Henry Garnet, the head of the Jesuits. Henry Garnet doesn't notify the authorities. He refuses to break the sanctity of confession. Right. But he goes out of his way to talk Catesby out of it. And he ends with Garnet convincing Catesby to wait until Garnet has sent a man to Rome to talk to the Pope and get the Pope's advice. And Catesby agrees. He said, I won't do anything till your man comes back from Rome. And he didn't hold his promise. He went ahead anyway.
After the executions and the shootout and so on, all these Catholic safe houses and all the people that, these sort of wealthier Catholics that were looking after these people, did there retribution on all of them?
Well, the people who were part of the plot, they lost all their holdings. Right. All their lands were confiscated. And people who weren't involved with the plot, like the leader of the Jesuits, Henry Garnet, he was hung, drawn and quartered. They pinned it on him. They wanted to make
examples of them.
Yeah, and get maximum political capital out of the situation. Even though by this time of the plot, things have calmed down with Spain. James, early in his reign, gets a ceasefire. He agrees a ceasefire with King Philip III, I think it would be, of Spain. Right. And so they agree a ceasefire, and things are improving on that front. But still, having that political capital of a Catholic plot, you see, this is why I wonder just how much the state knew about this plot. Never let a good crisis go to waste.
No, exactly.
And we'll just stop it just when we need to.
Yeah.
We'll let them, we get the bonus of all the land and all the holdings, and we get this political capital. And it's not like the British state wasn't sophisticated enough to do things like that. We know from reading about Walsingham and Lord Burleigh that, they were master plotters.
Yeah.
And conspirators themselves, One of the big things that sort of blew open the plot, I told you before, I got a print of the Monteagle letter. We don't know who wrote it. It was used with a disguised handwriting, and it wasn't signed. Some people say it was Tresham. Yeah. Lord Monteagle is Tresham's uncle, I think, and he would have been present at the state opening of Parliament. And Monteagle receives this letter maybe 10 days before the state opening of Parliament, and it's a warning letter. I'll read it, shall I?
Yeah, it's just basically asking him to steer clear of the building, isn't it?
Yeah. My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have care of your preservation. Therefore, I would advise you, as you tender your life, to devise some excuse to shift your attendance at this Parliament, for God and man hath concurred to punish the wickedness of this time. And think not slightly of this advertisement, but retire yourself into the country where you may expect the event in safety. For though there may be no appearance of any stir, yet, I say, they shall receive a terrible blow, this Parliament, and yet they shall not see who hurts them. This council is not to be condemned, because it may do you good, and can do you no harm, for the danger is past as soon as you have burnt this letter, and I hope God will give you the grace to make good use of it, to whose holy protection I commend you. So it's an anonymous tip-off.
Tip-off, yeah.
Don't go to the country, get out of London. So what does Monteagle do? He gives it straight to Burleigh, gives it straight to the, James's right-hand man. This is where sort of searches start,
Yeah.
So they need to start searching Parliament to find out. We should say at this point, because we left the story with the gunpowder in Thomas Percy's house.
Yeah, and they'd been shifting it over to this cellar, and there was a lot of firewood down there, wasn't there? Rather a lot.
Well, conveniently, this sort of undercroft becomes, the lease opens for it, and it's directly under the House of Lords, and Thomas Percy snaffles it up, and that's when they start moving it across. 36 barrels of gunpowder.
What is that, 2.5 ton, I think it works out at, something like that?
I read
2.5 tons?
I read 1 ton, but
1 ton.
We're estimating. I mean, from what I've read, like modern ballistics guys say that if that had gone off, it would have destroyed the entire House of Lords and everything and anyone within 100 metres.
Wow.
And this isn't like an average day at Parliament. This is the state opening of Parliament. So you've got the King there, Queen, princes. You've got all the bishops, all the lords, all the members of Parliament, all the judges, and all the records, all the parliamentary records, all your statutes, all your laws up in flames. I mean, it's a complete decapitation of the state.
Yeah, and then you got all the ordinary people just going about their lives, just happen to be in that area.
In that summer of of 1605, where Parliament's prorogued, Catesby approaches Henry Garnet, the head of the Jesuits, with a hypothetical question, He says, is it ever justified to kill innocents? And Henry Garnet says, in a just war, maybe. And this upset Henry Garnet because people are getting wind that something's coming, and this is what shakes him up, like, this guy's planning something. Yeah. So, yeah, it would have been unimaginable if it had actually happened. What would have happened, the chaos that would have ensued. You would have no law. How do you enforce a law if you don't have a physical copy? It's like today we keep physical copies of all the laws of the land, Yeah, it would be just like starting again almost, wouldn't it? That was the plan. And then put Elizabeth on the throne, a Catholic monarch. It was doomed to fail from the start. It was too audacious, really. Some people say it started out as just a lashing out of frustration, and then the second half of the plot, it was sort of delusions of grandeur, and we're going to restart with a Catholic monarch. It was never sensible. And they sent emissaries to Spain as well to try and get support from Spain. We've got X amount of thousand Catholics here who will help. I don't think they ever told them about the plot, but they said that maybe something would be coming, and if you want to send, this might be a good time to send some ships over. Like I said, the peace treaty, the ceasefire had already been signed. Spain had already been massively stung by the Spanish Armada in 1588. It lost all the maritime power at that point. With the big storm. Yeah. It's just completely botched invasion. It was that was sort of the nail in the coffin of it was an attempted invasion of England by Spain. There was various incursions going on before that. Francis Drake famously harassed the Spanish. He was just rampaging across Spain, just decimating Spanish ports and ships at will, seemingly, and that's why he became so famous as a commander, admiral, whatever. But he was more of a pirate, wasn't he, really? I would say so, I think so, yeah. It was Royal Navy sort of comes out of that sort of like privateer seagoing tradition where they... Absolutely, even if you come up to Trafalgar, they were taking the vessels back. That's 200 years later. And they were taking the vessels back, and then it got hit by a storm. It's funny how these storms seem to come up. And actually, the English people, especially back in the 1600s or whatever, they took that as a sign that God was with them. That they were... Like the Americans have a term for it as well, don't they? They have a different term. Manifest destiny, isn't it? Right. Manifest destiny, The Elizabethans would have called it divine providence. Yes. So it's funny how these storms sort of do crop up, and if it works in your favour, we've God on our side. Well, the plotters, they considered it divine providence that this Undercroft became available for lease directly under the House of Lords. Yes. It was. They saw that as a sign from God. A sign from God, that he was on their side, and he was sort of condoning this attempt, this slaughter, essentially. But so anyway, let's go back to the Monteagle letter. So Cecil gets this letter, this anonymous tip-off, and King James is off hunting somewhere, so he doesn't bother him. He waits for James to come back, and James is given the credit for decoding the letter that it's a plot to use powder. The Stuart family has a bad relationship with gunpowder. James's father was killed by gunpowder. He was assassinated. So, James, according to the state, James figures out, like, this is a plot, so this is when the searching starts. The Monteagle, who receives the letter, him and a few others, they start searching Westminster. And like we were describing before, it's a complete maze, of places. And they stumble across Guy Fawkes. And he tells him he's an employee of Thomas Percy. Yeah, and he called himself John Johnson. John Johnson. Great, isn't it? I'm John Johnson. And they let him go. They don't... They leave it. Right. And then they go back to James. Now, this is the story. Now, I think, and I'm not a historian or an expert, I think this is Cecil letting James take the credit, because Cecil is a very smart guy, like his father. And so they bring news of this John Johnson. And it would have given him brownie points to, here, you can have this one. You can say you did this. Absolutely. It'll make you look intelligent. And hey, to be fair, he was no slouch either. James I was a smart guy. But the story goes that Cecil takes it to King James, and he says, no, go back there and search properly. And so they do. And this is the midnight, early hours of the morning, November 5th, where this small party, they find Guy Fawkes there. He's wearing spurs for a horse. He's got matches. He's got a watch. And they find 36 barrels of gunpowder. Case closed.
I shouldn't laugh, but it is quite funny when you look at it like that. It's like, I mean, what was he going to say?
Well, do you know, it is, I'm John Johnson. That's what he said, basically. And I work for Thomas Percy. But at his interrogation, he was asked what he was planning to do. And his words, this might not be exact, but his words were, I was going to blow you Scotch beggars back to the mountains you came from. So, yeah, he wasn't one to mince his words.
Yeah, he's very brave as well. I mean, he knew what was coming.
Absolutely, once he was caught.
Yeah, so I suppose they couldn't make it any worse, could they, really?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you might as well just say what you think at that point, mightn't you? Because what's the point? You know that the worst is coming. And he managed to avoid it, as we said, you know, he apparently jumped off the gallows.
Hopefully he did, yeah. I'd like to think so.
So that was the plot blown. And so word gets out that Guy Fawkes has been arrested. The rest of the conspirators, they go ahead with the second part of the plan, the coup. They fled. Really? They go north to the Midlands, and Catesby, for whatever reason, I don't know what sort of grip he had on the other conspirators, but he pushes on and says, no, we're going to continue. We're going to rally the banner. We're going to rally the people to our banner. And they go around the Midlands. They go to Warwick Castle and steal a load of horses and weapons from there. And they end up at, like we've mentioned, at Holbeach House. And this is where the standoff is with Catesby and who else is there? Winter's there. Thomas Percy's there. Funnily enough, the night before they're found, they have some powder with them and it got saturated. So what they decide to do is lay out the powder next to the fire to dry.
You can't make this shit up, can you?
You can't make it. Yeah, it's Keystone Cops, isn't it? So guess what happens? It blows up. Catesby gets burnt. Loads of them get burnt and injured. And the next day, the King's men arrive, 200 of them, to Holbeach House, and there's a shootout. It doesn't last long. They reckon that it was the same.
One bullet got two men.
Winter and Percy and Catesby,
right,
who were already injured.
Right,
but yeah, they took one bullet between them apparently, and Catesby died clutching a picture of the Virgin Mary. So the story goes. Yeah, so that was the end of the plotters. They didn't get any support, you know, when they were rampaging around the Midlands trying to rally support with the other recusants. Like no one was interested. Yeah, like it was absolutely doomed to fail.
Dreadful business.
So yeah, a good chunk of the conspirators, a handful died at Holbeach House, and then the rest were fairly quickly rounded up in London and the surrounding areas.
I would have much preferred to have been one caught in Holbeach House and had a fighting chance of, you know, at least take one down with you.
Absolutely, and they'd made their minds up that they were going to die there. You know, Catesby said, "We will die here. This is the last stand." It's
a bit like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, you know.
Yeah, very much so. And so, I mean, the ironic thing is, you know, the thing that brewed this discontent was sort of multi-generational persecution. These conspirators, their dads had been imprisoned and fined and impoverished via the
so they're
fines.
Going to grow up, you know, hating the state, but did that to their parents and so on. And because you've just got to break that cycle somehow, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It doesn't. Violence doesn't lead anywhere. No. But the ironic thing is, because of their actions, this allowed James to bring back even more laws and more fines, and Catholics were persecuted even harder afterwards.
Thanks for listening. See you next time when we'll take another stroll down a road less travelled. Be lucky.
Be lucky.
Okay. Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo until the 4th day of July. Jack of diamonds, you're the meanest heart I know. Well, you up my poor pockets, my silver and gold. I'm going up on a mountain, gonna build me a whiskey still. sell you one bottle for a $20 bill. Going up on a mountain, gonna stand there looking down, so I can see my pretty baby whenever she comes around. Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird. She warbles as she flies, and she never hollers cuckoo until the